Guys, My Hero Academia is absolutely insane right now. If you thought last week's chapter was crazy, this one will definitely make it clear to you that Horikoshi has no chill. With the previous chapter, we opened up to the perspective of the hero killer Stain during the fall of the prison Tartarus. Avoiding the crowd, Stain figured that if Tartarus of all places had been compromised, then the outside world must be in an awful state as well, and so the gathering of information was paramount. From there, he made his way into a guard room only to find a single survivor desperately clinging onto something as opposed to his own gun. Stain would then take this object away from the guard as he curled in agony. It was stored data that the guard was especially against any allies of Shigaraki getting their hands on, but despite this, Stain took it anyways and assured the guard that it would reach the right man, for he was an ally to the world as it should be, but a beast all the same. And he would later fulfill this promise by providing said information to All Might, who would in turn pass it on to Tsukauchi. The intel was something they wouldn't have been able to access under normal circumstances, and so it was rather valuable to them. On it, they were able to uncover radio wave communications between All For One and his vestige within the quirk, which when deciphered, revealed that in actuality, as opposed to the presumed 2 months, Shigaraki would in fact be complete in the span of 38 days, which only left them 3 days until Shigaraki would become a completed vessel. Elsewhere, there'd be an international convention among several world powers in regards to the current crisis in Japan and All Might's direct request for aid. All things considered, their hands were tied until they couldn't afford to dispatch any of their forces to assist. Yet even still, the #1 hero of the United States of America, Star and Stripe, was on her way at the behest of her master, All Might. Now, I personally prefer the hero named Stars and Stripes, however the official translation goes with Star and Stripe, and so that is simply what we are going to go with. And to begin this latest chapter, we firstly have a side profile of Star and Stripe. And as we have said previously, she does look pretty different from most of the ladies we've encountered in the series thus far, but at the very same time is very much like a female All Might, down to even her hairstyle. But to follow this heroic visage, we would receive the face of evil himself as All For One sat atop his throne, surrounded by Nomu helpers, as he would express that the stakes were now higher than ever before. Despite being on such a small island nation, the heroes and police ultimately failed to win the game of hide and seek on account of all the escaped inmates and restlessness of the populace. To this, Spinner would bring to question why they didn't just flee overseas, and in response, All For One would explain that winning the game of hide and seek was only the first goal of his, that getting his hands on one for all was to be the second. Which caught Spinner a bit off guard as he assumed something major like that would be the final step. However, All For One is a man that has formulated plans that span lifetimes. But as his grand plan now nears its complete fulfillment, they simultaneously approach both their greatest hurdle and greatest opportunity. And if you remember, All For One is a man that absolutely loves probabilities, and at that, gambles like this are incredibly fun to him. But yeah, All For One will continue by saying that he has friends all across the globe. And considering his previous conversation with his younger brother at the height of his infamy, by friends, he means pawns who will do as he says. In Japan, the influence of All Might all but eliminated organized crime completely. However, overseas, that is not the case at all. And if such friends were to be left unchecked, there would certainly be worldwide dismay, which is to say that All For One absolutely anticipated the issues to be found with providing foreign heroic aid to Japan. But you know what, forget anticipating, he orchestrated it. But in regards to the aforementioned hurdle and a chance, he was referring to the presence of the world's strongest woman, Star and Stripe. He'd furthermore add to her reputation by expressing that she hails from the so-called home of heroes, the land of the free, and is among the most powerful heroes not only in America, but the entire world. The fact of the matter being that underhanded tricks simply would not work on such an individual. The hurdle being that if she were to intervene, they would surely be in trouble, whilst the chance being that if he were to get his hands on her quirk, the game would be all but over. Which again raises the question of what exactly her quirk might be. From the looks of things, Star and Stripe appearing here is similar to All Might pulling up back in the day, with the exception that unlike All Might, All For One can actually steal her quirk. And remember, All For One pretty much stomped out the vast majority of powerful quirks in Japan generations ago. And so whatever Star and Stripe has, it is surely monumental and the result of a far less suppressed quirk pool. All for One would then say that unlike Toya and the others, Spinner has pretty much acted as his bodyguard, but the time has come for him to play his part as well. And I just think the idea of little old Spinner being All for One's bodyguard is hilarious. Talk about a downgrade from Gigantomachia, but anyways, it was time for Spinner to truly assist Shigaraki. Before the league, Spinner was a nobody, a person discriminated against for his entire life on account of his heteromorphic physique. All for One would then express that especially now, there were just so many people like him that supported in secrecy. And with this, we would see some tagging in regards to the Paranormal Liberation Front, along with a poster denoting Spinner to be their poster boy. From here, we would have some surviving executives of the Liberation Front who would express that the fight wasn't over and that Liberation was still alive and well. And interestingly enough, each of these executives were part of Spinner's former squadron, which I for one am happy about because Horikoshi really just gave us all those Liberation villains only to have the vast majority of them captured. But I suppose it is difficult to make use of that many cool villains when you only have so many heroes at your disposal. With that being said, Skeptic was still advising behind the scenes and advocating for the recruitment of more Liberation soldiers. And despite his own personal grievances, he recognized that the League of Villains provided a very special opportunity as they were personally recognized by Redestro. He'd go on to exclaim that the League of Villains were indeed true liberators without question. And so with that, they were to be worshipped. The ones with the power to make them realize their true potential would be the Liberation Front. And I just think that is such an interesting stance to take. To treat them in such a way is to prey upon the weakness, the fragility of the mindset that is possessed by so many people in this current situation. The heroes and the system at large have simply failed them. It's not hard to imagine that for many, salvation will only come in the form of these destructive forces, these messiahs of liberation. And honestly, with all this hype towards Spinner, I would love to see him run into his hero, Stain. Overall, the Liberation Front intended to play their part in sowing the seeds of Shigaraki's destructive future. But as all this went on, Hawks, Best Jeanist, and Endeavor would continue on their travels as Star and Stripe would soon enter their airspace. And with that, Hawks intended to immediately begin planning countermeasures with her. It was reassuring to have her on their side in such trying times, but at the same time, he also recognized the unfavorable circumstances to which brought her in the first place and how this escapade wasn't exactly government sanctioned. Yet even still, Best Jeanist was sure she could handle the pressure, followed by, of course, a denim related joke. But just then over the intercom, Tsukauchi would call out to the three heroes suddenly, because as it turns out, 50 kilometers from the designated landing spot, there was yet another presence. He has arrived. We would then see an exposed hand draped in dark rags, a hand with a hole in the center we may recognize to be unique to All for One. Star and Stripe would then give a big smile as she put her hands to her hips and would acknowledge this figure's presence. Would you believe it, Star and Stripe would face down against Shigaraki, to whom she would question if he were the villain referred to as All for One, as the expression would shift to one of intensity and fury. As now atop a gnome with far longer hair and dark clothing, it was Shigaraki who would also question who exactly he was. And that was the chapter. Goodness gracious, already we are faced with such a major clash of titans. Star and Stripe's presence in this conflict was the one bit of reassurance the heroes had, and now she is liable to get bodied. At the end of the day, this is simply not her story. Hell, she just got here, and so I can understand why she's not about to just pull up and dog walk the villains. But my lord, did I not expect her to face this man so quickly. Horikoshi is absolutely diabolical for this man. I mean, like All for One said, if they get her quirk, it is game over. But at the same time, if she beats the brakes off of Shigaraki and wins, the heroes win. And with that in mind, let me just tell you how this is going to ultimately go. Star and Stripe is going to be overwhelmingly powerful. We are going to learn about her quirk and it is going to be damn cool. Shigaraki is going to be wildly overpowered by her power and probably won't even get a touch in for the most part, but in the end is going to take her quirk and all will seem lost for the heroes. This is all assuming there will be no interruptions and or new additions to this aerial conflict. Now, the reason I say Shigaraki gets ragdolled here in the beginning is because of how his powers work for the most part. He is a one-touch killer, or in this case, winner. All he has to do is grab her and he wins, a concept I honestly hate for this series as it does combat no favors, but it is what it is. Now, I don't doubt that Shigaraki will make use of quirks that don't entail direct touch here, but more than anything, despite his incredible strength, super strength, or whatever, I don't think we should expect any hand-to-hand feats from him. And listen, it is not easy being a female pro hero in this series. If you are a lady pro hero in the world of My Hero Academia, your chances of getting super violated are no different from the chance of a germ genocide anytime you use hand sanitizer. At the very least, I just hope Star and Stripe has some good moments before then. I mean, how badass would it be if she has some kind of Superman type quirk? Which I say on account of all the All Might influences, who in turn is largely influenced by the Man of Steel. Shigaraki further bringing into question who he is was an interesting tidbit, as it will be really interesting to see how he's adapted to All For One's influence. At this moment, he seems to be far more cognizant of his situation as opposed to during the prison break, and so his completion does actually seem to be a lot more apparent, but at the same time, sending him out just 3 days before complete fulfillment is a major gamble indeed, but honestly, based on past instances, I wouldn't be surprised if this development is derailed or disrupted in some way. I certainly hope that isn't the case, but it's pretty much a trend at this point. Now, I think an easily overlooked yet absolutely monumental aspect of this chapter was the fact that stealing One for All is only the second step of a greater plan on the part of All For One, which means he has an even greater ambition ahead of him. One that I absolutely expect to involve the quirk Singularity. This chapter was amazing, and I hope you'll be here with us for plenty more by subscribing to Plot Armor with notifications on. Thank you all so much for your continued support. The Plot Army is now over 300,000 soldiers strong, and we only intend to continue rising. To continue the discussion, you can drop a comment, and of course hit us up over on social media, as well as our new Discord server linked in the description below. Now, if you'd like to get your hands on some physical manga volumes, please consider using our RightStuf affiliate link in the description as well. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.